Hey, so let's cover macronutrients in a matter of, let's say 10 minutes. I'm going to do my best to maybe finish up before that. So macronutrients are just a fancy word for the nutrients that we derive from foods, such as proteins, carbohydrates, and fats, healthy fats. And the way in which you want to go about calculating your own personal macros is by first understanding your basal metabolic rate, or BMR for short. How you can determine your BMR, I usually have my clients work with a website called calculatornet.com. I believe that's what it is. And it has all kinds of calculators. Once you get to that page, you click on the link that says BMR calculator. From there, you're going to plug in your height and weight and age and sex, and you are going to come up with a number. So for purposes of this video and an example, we're going to use 1,200 calories as a BMR. 1,200 calories a day, not a week, ladies. So that would be our example point, but that's what you want to do first. Once you have your BMR, you have to be honest with yourself and think about, how much activity you're getting in your week consistently. So there's several categories associated with the level of activity. I'm going to go through them real quick. And they're multipliers that would actually be multiplied against your BMR number. And everybody's BMR number is going to be different, right? Because we're all different ages and heights and weights and all that. So the first category of activity is sedentary, and that's multiplier is 1.2. The second category is lightly active, working out about 1 to 3 times a week. The multiplier is 1.375. Next, we go to moderately active, 3 to 5 times a week, multiplier 1.55. We go to active, someone who's working out 5 to 7 days a week, the multiplier is 1.725. And then finally, the last active category would be very active or strenuous activity, 6 to 7 days a week, really going hard at it. The multiplier is 1.90. So for purposes of this example, we're going to go with a BMR of 1,200. Yours will be different. And then I'm going to just select moderately active. So we're going to multiply my 1,200 calorie BMR by 1.55 in the moderately active category. And that gets me to 1,860 calories. So what that means is I could take in that amount of calories or somewheres near in that range of 1,860 calories along with my exercise that I'm doing and nothing else, and I'd probably maintain or be pretty close to my current weight. So many clients show up to me and they want to lose some weight. So what we do from there, once we have that AMR number, active metabolic rate, we talk about the calorie deficit number that has to come off that AMR number. So my guidance to my clients initially, because they're going to start tracking their macros, they're starting to get a little bit more buttons up on their nutrition, maybe their activity is still staying the same. I think it's a bit over challenging out of the gate and somewhat a little stressful to come out of the gate and saying, okay, I want to lose a pound a week. And nothing is ever guaranteed. But if you're wanting to lose a pound a week, you've got to take a 500 calorie deficit off your AMR number. So, and that's certainly fine if you wanted to do that. I usually work with my clients to say, hey, let's start off with a half a pound a week weight loss. And again, all of that will vary depending on what's going on. And let's start off with a calorie deficit of 250. So for purposes of this example, we're going to go with a 250 calorie deficit off of that 1860, which was my AMR number with my moderate activity. And so what I like to do initially guiding my clients on starting to track their macros, I like to split that final caloric number, which is 1,610. That's the example that I'm using here. And I like 35% on protein, 35% of those calories on carbs, 1-to-1 ratio, and 30% of those calories towards healthy fats. So the way those numbers calculate out, I'm going to take 35% times the 1610 for both protein and carbs, and you're getting the same number. It's about 564 calories. A gram of protein and a gram of carbohydrates are 4 calories a gram. So when I multiply the 35% times the 1610 calories, I get about 564 calories, like I just mentioned. I'm going to divide that number by 4, and I get about 140 grams of protein as well as 140 grams of carbohydrates. So those are my macros, the numbers that I'm shooting for protein and carbs. With the remaining calories, which is about 483, 30% of that, right, for healthy fats. Fat calories are more dense, so they're going to be a higher caloric number than your proteins and your carbs. They're 9 calories a gram. So I'm going to take that 483, divide it by 9, and I have 54 grams of fat. So my personal macros, or the macros associated with this example, is 140 on the protein, 140 on the carbs, and 54 grams on the fats. So some of you might be sitting there going, oh my God, how am I going to get 140 grams of protein? Well, yeah. So what we first need to have you do after you calculated your macros is you've got to get a baseline. If you're not even tracking your food and what you eat and drink right now, you're just shooting up at the stars. And maybe you hit it, maybe you don't. So I usually recommend to my clients, start off with the free version of the MyFitnessPal app. You put in all your personal data, but what you need to do in the app is you have to put in your macros and your calories just as we calculated them here for this example. Once they're in there, then you start to input your breakfast, lunch, snacks, dinner, cocktails. Yes, please add your wine or your margaritas or whatever it is that you're cocktailing on. And also track your water. And so I ask my clients to do that for about a week, week and a half, so we can get a baseline, right? Because if your macronutrient for protein is 140 grams at some point in time in the future, and you track for the first week and a half and you're only getting in 50 to 60 grams, we have some work to do, right? So it's not like I'm going to say to my client, hey, tomorrow you better go get after 140 grams of protein. It just doesn't work that way. So you're going to need to see what you're eating, what meals are you struggling with where there's lower amounts of protein. And if you evenly kind of spread your protein across the day, that's how you want to go about it. You shouldn't be front loading or back loading your day with protein. Sometimes that's going to happen based on your schedule. But so that's pretty much the basics of getting your own personal macronutrients. The other thing I remind women of, especially as we're aging, is do not get fixated on the scale. That number is made up of many things besides you thinking it's just fat. Now, I'm not saying fat isn't in that number, and there's a couple of forms of fat. You've got your subcutaneous fat, and then you have your visceral fat. And visceral fat is really something that we don't want. That is that fat that builds up around our organs and can be very problematic. Women want to have a visceral fat of less than 10. And so if you have a bioimpedance scale or are interested in getting one, it's not like they're 100% correct, but they're at least going to give you somewheres up in the low 90 to mid 90%, validation of that number on the scale. What is that number made up of? It's going to be water weight, your lean muscle mass, your subcutaneous fat, your visceral fat, your bone mass, your protein. There's a variety of things that go into that scale, that scale number. It's not just fat. So that's another thing I remind my clients of. So that's really about it, guys. Hopefully this explains it to you a little bit better, that you can have a better handle on what your own personal macros should be and start to track against them. I would really highly recommend that you do that. And any questions or comments, just put them here on the page. Let me know if you've got if you have any clarification that's needed, or if you're just feeling like you didn't really calculate your macros correctly. So happy to answer any questions and continue the dialogue. There'll be more of these videos that I'll be sharing along the way. So hopefully it was helpful. Thanks, and have a great rest of your day.